I've always been a fan of these stories, and for a particular reason. I can oddly relate to many of them. I'm 20, and I think back on how many weird situations I've been in, and it's almost comedic irony because of how young I am. Yet, I've had what seems like a lifetime of creepy shit happen to me. But one of these situations sticks out the most. This story is completely true, and dates back to when I was a sophomore in high school, taking place in a suburb of Kansas City, Missouri. Me and my ex-girlfriend went to my high school football game on a Friday evening in September of 2013. We left a little early at about 9:30 because there was a showing of a movie we both wanted to see, and our football team was way ahead in score, so we thought we wouldn't miss anything. We pretty much won already. I just recently got a vehicle as I turned 16 that August, and while it wasn't extravagant, I was happy with it. While driving to our local AMC theater, you have to pass about 10 to 15 minutes of nothing but fields and trees, a small community college that I currently attend, and a few houses. While driving through the empty stretch, we both noticed my radio was cutting out, and my lights were turning on and off. Eventually, my lights turned off completely, so we couldn't see anything while driving, and I was fairly sure my truck was about to break down. We decided to call it quits on the movie and do a U-turn in an attempt to drive home through the empty stretch. While driving, my vehicle slowed down and shut off completely, so I pulled off to the side of the road. To my right was an empty field outlined by a few trees, and to my left there were two warehouses with a few lights around them. I was starting to stress out about how much money it would cost for a new battery or alternator for my truck, as I was fairly sure either one of those were the culprit for my truck breaking down. And I had parents who made me pay for my own shit. I knew financially I was on my own for this one. I attempted to call my family for help, and no one answered. Strange, I thought. My girlfriend was kind of freaked out because no one was answering, and while this empty stretch is very pretty during the day, it was damn creepy at night. Fog is very heavy in the fall and spring months due to a decent-sized river that resides in the area. I have to admit, for the creepy scenery and what was about to happen, I really wasn't as creeped out as I should have been. About 10 minutes pass, and nothing, until a car speeding down the same road we were on quickly stops, the tires screeching. It was a police car. The cop opens his door and put one foot out with the radio in his hand asking, "Have you guys seen a woman around here? She's dark hair, kinda small." Me and my girlfriend look at each other like, what the fuck? We both said the obvious no, as this area was fairly secluded, especially at night. Right after we responded, the cop said something in the radio and quickly sped off. This dude was in a hurry. Me and my girlfriend were getting a little anxious. The cop didn't even ask us if we were alright or offer us any assistance. This was really strange. But as my financial woes popped back into my head, I focused on my truck for a bit and how I would be able to afford the repairs. Then, literally 3 to 4 minutes later, I see something to my left that I'll definitely remember for a long time. A frail woman with greasy long hair, wearing nothing but a gown. The way she walked was extremely creepy. Her left hand was contorted and she was twitching as she walked. I wasn't really processing what I was seeing until I noticed her gripping something in her right hand. Then I quietly asked my girlfriend, "Do you see that?" She responded with a yes, and we said nothing else. We just cautiously watched this woman walk across the corresponding road within 50 yards away, with the most fucked up expressions on our faces. This woman didn't seem to even notice us. She was just staring blankly in front of her, and continued that creepy walk. She eventually disappeared down the road and was out of sight. I honestly just brushed this off and continued to get in touch with my brother, whom I did, and was now driving to give us a jump start. We get my truck up and going again, and instead of going straight home, we decide to go to my uncle's house because he has a diagnostic machine, and we wanted to know exactly what happened with my truck. While on the way to my uncle's house, we had to go down the corresponding road, the same direction the woman went. While driving down the road, I didn't even think about what I had seen. Again, I was just worried about being able to afford parts. We then are on the same road, except this road is even more desolate. There is nothing but trees for miles on each side. While driving for about 15 through 20 minutes down the road, I see something to my right side. It was the same woman I saw before. She stopped in front of my headlights and then proceeded to turn around. I got a look at her face, and she was pretty terrifying. She looked like she was methed out and was an older woman with tons of wrinkles with a blank stare. I looked to my right, and my girlfriend just looked at me really weirdly and said, "Fuck this," and gave me a half-hearted nervous laugh. Despite us being creeped out, we again didn't think much of this. It wasn't resonating like it was supposed to. We both were too far caught up in getting my truck fixed. I make it to my uncle's house. Turns out it was my alternator, and he told me to be sure to not shut my vehicle off until I made it home, and I would make it there fine. Me and my girlfriend get home, and it's about 1:30 a.m. We both sat on my bed, and I kind of nonchalantly brought up the cop and the woman and everything that had happened. It both hit us very quickly, and we were like, "Holy fuck, that was seriously something out of a horror movie." Then, something really weird came up. This part is actually one of the things that creeps me out the most. Where we saw her walking the first time, she was a good 3-hour walk from where we saw her next, and it was maybe an hour and a half after the first time we had seen her, at most. Seriously. Not only that, but the way she walked definitely wasn't fast. She was twitching all over the place and seemed like she had a slight limp to her. We both were wondering how she got there so quickly. We also both concluded that the cop driving by us and the creepy woman walking by had to be related. A coincidence like this is almost non-existent. One takeaway from this story is to be aware of your surroundings. No matter what may be on your mind at the time, it's pretty safe to be aware. This night could have gone south quick, and we truly didn't recognize that to the extent I should have. I am a 25-year-old male. This happened to me when I was about 12 years old, when on a week-long fishing trip with my family. I grew up in a small town called Two Rivers, Alaska, about 50 miles south of the Arctic Circle. I use the word town loosely because it was a 15 or so mile stretch of road in the middle of the woods, about an hour north of Fairbanks, the closest town, with dirt roads and houses branching out along the road in the middle of a hilly and heavily wooded area. We had a single gas station, a laundromat, a cafe, and an elementary school. K through 8th grade with about 50 kids attending any given year. I mention all this because based on this lifestyle, I was relatively ignorant of how bad people could be. Though my parents tried to explain this a little bit to me and shared tips to prevent being targeted by creeps. Don't talk to strangers. Always walk with your back straight, chest out and eyes forward to look less vulnerable. And if anyone ever tries to kidnap you, kick, scratch, claw, and scream as loud as you can. I took this advice seriously, though I never thought I would actually find myself in a situation like this, so I became complacent. When this took place, it was the middle of summer in June. I remember because it was Father's Day. The fact that it was Father's Day becomes relevant later. Summer in Alaska means 24 hours of daylight. The sun is high in the sky all day and night. The darkest it gets is when the sun gets low enough that it hides behind a hill, though the sky remains blue, and the weather is always mild and pleasant. In contrast to winter, when we get 3 hours of daylight a day, and it's negative 40 degrees. Myself, my mother and father, and my 2 brothers, 11 and 7, and my 11-year-old cousin, went for a week-long fishing excursion down in southern Alaska. Southern Alaska is absolutely beautiful, with lush green forests and huge mountains. God's country. If you go down south enough, it becomes a literal rainforest. We drove about 200 miles south to an area called the Russian River. One of the intimidating things about Alaska is that you can drive hundreds of miles in any direction and not see a sign of civilization. It's just vast, beautiful, untouched, and pristine wilderness. The last frontier. We arrived at the river around 3 in the afternoon and immediately set off to catch some salmon. We park the camper in this parking lot/camping area on a hill and set up our tents. We then hike down this trail through the woods that zigzags down the face of the hill, similar to a goat trail, but with railings. From the tip of the hill you can hear the babbling river and can see parts of it through the gaps in the trees, but as soon as you begin walking down you are immediately engulfed in thick vegetation and tall thick trees, spruce and birch primarily. When we arrive at the bottom, there are combat fishers everywhere. For those who don't know, combat fishing is close quarters, shoulder-to-shoulder fishing. People up and down the river fighting over the same fish. Sometimes if you snag one, a person will actually grab your line, cut it, and run off with your fish. And there can often be fistfights over fish in spots along the river. When people see someone with a fish on, crowds of people begin to stampede to that area in an attempt to catch one themselves, or see if they can get the opportunity to steal it. It's weirdly intense for what would otherwise be a relaxing activity. We find our spots that aren't too crowded, feed our lines, attach our lures, and begin fishing. On my side of the river is a small gravel bar, a slight incline, and the main trail mostly covered in a thin tree line where people can walk up and down the river, then thick vegetation going up the hill where the camps are located. On the opposite side, a steep embankment and more thick wilderness. No trail, no camping spots, nothing. Just hundreds and hundreds of square miles of forest on the other side of this river. A few hours pass, and no luck for anyone, not even a nibble. We hear the occasional shouting of, "Fish on!" and then the sound of dozens of feet stomping through the water towards the voice. We can see the fish everywhere, but still not so much as a nibble. It was about 8 p.m. now, and everyone had given up by this point and decided to call it a night. However, it was Father's Day, and I was determined to catch a fish for my father as a present. I was on my own, but there were still quite a few people around scattered up and down the river. Still not having much luck, I picked up my net and pole and moved a little further down the river, in hopes that being further away from the main crowds I'd have all the fish that managed to get through all to myself. However, I was a little wary of being too far from people because every so often I'd hear some rustling and crunching in the woods, across the other side of the river. And in southern Alaska, there is a dense population of grizzly bears, so I make it a point to make sure that there are at least some people around me, just in case a bear decided to come lumbering through and get in on some combat fishing too. Grizzlies, though huge, are often just as afraid of us as we are of them, unless spooked, she has a cub, or we are in the way of their food, which most of us were, here in the river. I'm slowly wading through the river, attempting to just snag a salmon in my net at this point, having had shit luck with my rod. Now I'm so focused on my goal that I didn't realize that it's 1 a.m. Since the sun never set, I had lost all track of time. I had been down in the river for hours. The other thing I hadn't noticed was that I was concentrating so hard on catching a fish for my dad, I had wandered away from everyone. I look up and down the river, and there is absolutely no one in sight. Not even the distant sound of talking, walking through the water, or the sound of lines being cast. The only thing I hear is the babbling of the quick-moving water all around me as I'm wading in the middle of the river. I begin to feel anxious and uncomfortable, which is unusual because I grew up in these woods. I begin to get tunnel vision and concentrate on any sound that might come over the sound of the water. I hear nothing until a rustle and the cliche as hell snap of a twig. Any experienced woodman would tell you, the only thing that snaps twigs in the American wilderness are bears and people. What was worse was the sound came from in front of me, up the embankment on the opposite side of the river, where no one should be. I looked up the embankment on the opposite end of the river, about 25 feet from me, and I see a blonde tuft of hair in the bush. I stare at it for a few seconds, not entirely sure of what I'm seeing, nervous as shit that it's a bear, until the hair begins to rise, and so does the hair on my neck as I see that it's a middle-aged man standing from a crouched position, obviously hiding, trying not to be seen. I would rather it have been a bear. Wouldn't be the first time I've run into one. He has bright curly blonde hair, pale skin, a beer gut, and a bright pink hoodie. which seems odd for someone to be wearing in the middle of the Alaskan woods. He's staring at me, and I'm looking back at him. "Hey there, boy," he said in a gargled, rough voice, partially drowned out by the sound of the river. "Hey," I said back nervously, but trying not to sound it. "I see you have a net there. I could really use that. All I have is a pole." "It's my dad's," I said back. "Where is he? You shouldn't be all alone out here. Lots of bears around here. Come with me. I have a secret fishing hole just up the side of the river through the trees a bit. There are a lot of fish we can both catch together. We can take turns using your net." Yeah, go fuck yourself, I'm thinking. I'm not a moron. "There's a small maintenance bridge just down the river," he says. I keep looking at him. The thick forest on either side starts to feel more like tall, foreboding walls, trapping me in here with no other soul in sight. Just me and this man. "Meet me there," he said suddenly and sternly. Me being the shy and self-conscious type I am, I stuttered and just said, "All right." He backs into the tree line, where I can barely see him, and begins watching me as he walks down river. I had said okay, in hopes that he would just walk away without looking back at me. But since he was, I slowly started making my way towards the bridge. I'm not stupid. I know this isn't right. He was obviously trying to remain unseen before I spotted him. How long had he been following me? Skulking through the woods, watching me, waiting for me to wander off by myself. There should have been no one on that side of the river, and I haven't seen anyone on that side all day. He's still walking just ahead of me on the other side of the river, looking back from time to time to make sure that I was still coming. He turns away, and I immediately bend down and pretend to tie my shoe. I'd look up and wait until the first second that he's out of sight. I do a 180 and begin walking back the opposite direction looking for someone, anyone, so it wouldn't just be me and this freak. I look back, and my heart sinks into my stomach. That terrible tingling feeling in my stomach. Like butterflies, but the butterflies all suffer from severe anxiety. I see the man standing in the middle of the bridge, staring right dead at me, seemingly peering into my soul. I can't quite see his face, but I can sense his intense agitation. I don't know why this creeped me out so much, but he raises his hand and begins waving at me. I turn away and keep walking, feeling his gaze drill right into me. Finally, I see a couple just at the bend of the river. I jog and get up close to them, and I continue to fish, still determined to get my dad a fish for Father's Day. I should have just said screw it and made the walk back to camp. But no, I continued to fish. The crowds of people are severely thinned out at this point. Lots of distance between the few remaining people, and the occasional couple holding hands walking down the trail or along the river. Then, it happened again. I got too damn focused on what I was doing that I hadn't noticed, yet again, I was all by myself. I am a fucking idiot. I didn't notice right away because I was too enthralled in fishing, concentrating on where the fish are located and where I should dip my net since the bending light through the water is misleading where the fish actually are. But my almost trance-like state was suddenly broken by the loud, thunderous sound of someone stomping and charging through the water, getting closer to me. My first thought was, fuck, bear. I look up and see a flash of pink and blonde. It's the man, and again, I would have rather it been a damn bear. I feel a hard pressure on my arm, and I feel the collar of my shirt getting yanked up, choking me. "I thought you were going to share your net," he says, oddly calm, but at the same time I can hear and feel the predatory aggression in his voice. I'm being dragged through the water towards the other side of the river. I can't keep my footing, and I can't pull away from his grip. I knew I should scream. I needed to scream. In my head, I desperately wanted to scream, but I was frozen and confused. It just happened so fast I was still trying to process it, yet it felt like it was all happening in slow motion at the same time. It felt like it wasn't really happening. Even if I had tried to scream, I was being choked with my shirt to the point that it burned, and I didn't think anyone would hear me over the rumbling river. I just went limp, playing fucking dead, blankly staring off. I still don't know why that's all I did. My secret spot is just over there, you little shit. You will love it, I promise. There are tons of fish for us," he says, with an increasingly aggressive tone. "No one will find it." The tight grip on my arm began to ache, yet I was still clinging to the fishing net and fishing rod. I remembered just staring at the sky. The edge of my vision was circled by the tips of the trees. The sky was a very dull blue and white. No clouds in the sky. I don't know why this visual stands out so prominently in my memory, but it does. "Hey, bear!" I hear this lightly echo through the river. "Hey, bear!" I suddenly feel the man's grip loosen, and I fall completely submerged in the cold water. I inhaled some because he dropped me so suddenly. I get up and begin coughing up the water that I accidentally drank, and I see a group of people coming down the trail through a gap in the tree line. About 8 of them, walking with a sense of urgency like they were on a mission. Then I see one of them is my mom. I hear her yell my name. I grab my net and quickly pull my pole from under the water and begin walking towards the trail. I look back, and the man is nowhere to be seen. He seemingly disappeared, though I assume he quickly hopped up the opposite embankment he was dragging me to when he heard the people coming and ducked out of sight. I join the group relieved and decide that I'm done fishing tonight. It's not worth being potentially molested and killed by a dirty Q-tip looking curly-headed creep. The last thing I see being that stupid pink hoodie. It was 3 a.m. and the sky was still bright. It turns out that my mother had gotten worried that I hadn't returned from fishing yet, so she sent my brothers and cousins with a walkie-talkie to go and look for me. They scorned the trail for about 30 minutes, and they suddenly came upon a mama bear and her cub. They contacted my mom on the walkie-talkie and told her that they ran into a sow and her cub. My mother, rest her soul, went into her own mama bear mode, and in order to protect her own cubs, she grabbed a rifle and as many people in the neighboring camps as she could, and they set off on the trail to find my brothers, cousin, and me. They just happened to stumble upon me first, but we found my brothers and cousins soon after. We made our way back to camp, and I sat up by the fire for about 30 minutes, thinking about what all just happened. No one saw the man, and I never told anyone what happened, maybe embarrassed that I did nothing to fight the man off. This just goes to show you that even in the woods in Alaska, you never know who may be watching you. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. And if you'd like to gain early access to my content, as well as some other cool perks, make sure you check out my Patreon page. It's a cool way for you guys to support the channel and get some cool perks. I appreciate you all watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.